A new push now for all congressmen to live under the very rules that they impose on us, regular folks in the nation, including the new regulations of Obamacare. Republican Senator Rand Paul is introducing that constitutional amendment. He joins us now. Senator, good to see you. And so what is the purpose of this?
Well, you know, ever since I ran for office, people would come up to me and say, well, you know, Congress, what makes me mad is they pass laws and then they exempt themselves. So my amendment would say that Congress shall pass no law that they exempt themselves or the president or the Supreme Court. One of the particularly galling things about Obamacare is that the chief justices who decided the case aren't going to have to live under it. They'll get special health care and they won't have to live under Obamacare, and I think that's wrong.
And you know, the odds of this passing, right? Because to get a constitutional amendment through, you need, what is it, three-fifths of the states. It's like two-thirds majority vote in both the House and the Senate, and also three-fourths of the states. So how are you going to, you know, the odds of you actually getting this through are pretty slim.
It will take an enormous groundswell, but I think there's a lot of movement among the public for this, Republican or Democrat or Independent. There's also a great movement for term limits. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with Washington right now, and I think you'll find that if these were put to the American people, you'd get a 75–80% vote for term limits, and Congress shall not exempt themselves.
It's so true, and yet, you know, Congress does what it's going to do, and you know, this is an effort to hold Congress accountable. We've been talking on this show for a week now about executive accountability, and where is that? I mean, you know, we've been asking person after person who is going to be held responsible for the disastrous rollout of Obamacare, the money that it's cost Americans, the time it's cost the American people. How do you and Congress go about exacting that?
Well, you know, I think we publicly can point out the problems and the hypocrisy. Interestingly, the government was shut down with Democrats refusing to accept a one-year delay on the individual mandate. Now you've got a dozen of them saying, oh, guess what? It's such a horrible rollout. We're now in favor of delaying the individual mandate. So there certainly is some irony that Democrats shut down government because they wouldn't accept a one-year delay. Now it's so bad they're actually in favor of a one-year delay.
And now, you know, looking at what happened, we just did a piece last week on how Obamacare was pushed through the U.S. Congress, and we talked about the fact that, you know, Scott Brown was elected and he ran on being the no vote that would stop Obamacare, and then Harry Reid basically changed the rules and said, well, I can pass a bill that will change 1/6 of the U.S. economy by deeming it passed, and as long as I have 51 votes, I'm good. Do you think you could undo Obamacare with 51 votes same way if the Republicans got control of the Senate?
Perhaps, but this is always the danger of these conference committees where things go together on a budget. Like right now, they're talking about convening a conference committee to get to compromise. The danger is what comes out of the conference committee can sometimes be passed with 51% vote. It makes it easier, and that's why some of us objected to the budget going unless the Democrats would agree not to raise the debt ceiling through 51%. Part of the reason for having supermajorities required was to slow things down and to have more debate and to make it more difficult for one party to run roughshod over the country.
You still have a Democrat in the White House, which President Obama won't be signing that bill anytime soon. Let me ask you about something else that's been getting a lot of attention in the news, and that is your speaking out on what you've called the war against Christians in various countries in this world, in particular Muslim-dominated countries. And we've seen more and more violence against Christians in Egypt, for example. Today there was a story out of Iran with I think it was 80 lashes for 4 Christians. They had to get lashed for drinking wine at communion. And you've been very outspoken about this, saying the administration is not doing enough to call attention to it. What more would you have them do?
Well, you know, about a month ago, a Christian village in Syria was overrun, and a young man by the name of Sarkis El-Zakam was told to convert or die. And he said, I am a Christian, and if you must kill me for being a Christian, do it. And these were his last words. I think the president needs to speak out about this, but we also need to not gloss over that there's a religious component to this. Since 9/11, we've been apologizing and saying, oh, this isn't the Islamic religion. Well, it's not all of Islam. In fact, it's a minority of Islam, but it's not 1 in a million. It's about 10%. In England, there were 500,000 people who said, well, the subway bombings, I kind of sympathize with killing British citizens in the subway through violence. And that's alarming that there's that large of a percentage, 10, maybe 15% of Islam, that's saying violence against Christians and unarmed non-combatants is okay. And I think that is alarming.
What should our president be doing differently on that?